Hey everybody, Hoosier Jedi here with another review for you. This time we're talking about episode 15 of season 1 of Green Lantern, the animated series called Reboot. Oddly enough, with that name alone, I'm slightly reminded of the popular 90s cartoon series Reboot, given what we're dealing with here, and I think that may not be a coincidence. But we'll talk more about what the main crux of this plot, the main plot crux of this episode, in a little while. First, let's start off with one of our many Green Lantern guest characters this time around. We've got quite a few folks from the comics showing up. And the first one we are introduced is, of course, none other than venerable Green Lantern supporting character Tomar Ray. Now, in the live action movie, he was voiced by none other than the esteemed Jeffrey Rush. Here he is also voiced by a Jeffrey, but this is the esteemed Jeffrey Bennett, who is probably best known as the voice of Johnny Bravo. Yeah, who remembers that show? Wasn't Johnny Bravo a kick? But anyway, he has quite a few other roles under his belt. He was Dexter's dad on Dexter's Laboratory. To folks maybe of my generation, probably remember him as Hardak from Batman the Animated Series. Character only turned up, I believe, once or twice, but still a very, very memorable character. And he's gotten quite a lot of other voice acting work under his belt. And he does an absolutely fine job here as Tomar Ray. Now, with that said, we'll get to some of the other guest stars this episode as we go along. Let's roll along with the main plot, which is Hal and Tomar Ray investigating the Manhunter Temple. Now, I have to say here, I'm a little disappointed that Hal is really not thinking things through. Maybe this hasn't quite been established in the show and I just have not really noticed it, but Green Lantern rings, at the very least in the comics, are capable of scanning stuff. I mean, the Green Lanterns can basically use them as a tricorder. And even Hal Jordan does this in the comics. He's not an idiot. He's basically a space cop. And you would think that a space cop would have the sense to, maybe scan a place that he has every reason to believe is incredibly dangerous before he goes in there. Now, granted, okay, maybe I missed it, and this is not a power that they have on the TV show, but, still. When Tomar Ray says, okay, we've found this temple, we should report to the Guardians, which is, the sensible thing to do, Hal, of course, has to be a fool and go in there. Now, okay, it doesn't allow for a fight to happen if Hal doesn't go in there and set everything off, but, still, you'd think that Hal would learn the value of a little bit of preparation. Then again, to be completely fair, he probably just doesn't want to get told to sit on his hands by the Guardians, which is kind of what they're good at. But anyway, so they get in there, and of course they find some manhunters. Now, really, at that point, why do they go poking around even further? I mean, did Hal learn nothing from what happened last episode? You have confirmed that there are manhunters in there, Hal. You know they're insanely dangerous. And you don't know for sure that there's only 3 of these things. And keep in mind, 3 of them were almost enough to take down you and Guy Gardner. So, yeah, leaving at that point, or, going for some reinforcements, that's what any sensible and prudent adult would do. But, of course, there needs to be a fight, so they go in, they find more manhunters, blah, 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 blah. And, of course, the manhunters are difficult to fight until the final act of the show, when suddenly they became incredibly easy to destroy for no apparent reason other than that the episode is almost over. Folks, you're probably going to hear me harp about this quite a lot between now and the end of the season, but I'm going to do that simply because it's that kind of idiotic writing that really just drives me up the wall. Anyway, okay, sorry, I'm looking at my notes here. Let's move that a little closer so that we don't have to keep doing that. Okay, now, I gotta take a moment here to, since I spoke about them a minute ago, talk about the Guardians. here the Guardians are exhibiting what I consider one of the classic lazy tricks of storytelling. And it basically goes a little bit something like this. Long ago in a distant land, I, Aku, the shapeshifter. Oh, okay, that's Samurai Jack. Okay, basically, it will always be in an ancient time. There was some horribly dangerous thing, and it caused a whole lot of trouble. Eventually, the good guys were able to put a stop to it, and rather than destroy it, they just locked it away somewhere. Now, granted, maybe if you're talking about something that's magical, then maybe destroying it is much more risky, but the Manhunters are a product of science. Why the hell don't the Guardians just throw these things into a freaking sun? It's not like they're like stars are in short supply in the galaxy. In fact, there are over 400 billion stars that we know of. So I'm sure the Guardians could have found one they could have thrown the Manhunters into. And frankly, as we've seen, if they can be taken down by Green Lanterns like this, I'm pretty sure the Manhunters cannot survive being thrown into a sun. But the Guardians seemed perfectly content to apparently just lock them away in some creepy temples spread all across the galaxy. So let me get this straight, Guardians. You're going to take these incredibly dangerous robots that have exterminated virtually every living thing in an entire sector of space, and you're going to spread them out all across the galaxy, where if some chump happens to wake these things up, they can immediately start spreading havoc just about anywhere. That's what you want to do rather than just destroying the stupid things. I mean, you built them, you have to know how to take them apart. Folks, this is sort of like if I had a bunch of nuclear weapons in my possession, one of them went off and, say, blew up Pittsburgh, and I decided, oh, well, that was certainly bad. Rather than taking these to some sort of nuclear weapon dismantlement facility, I'm just going to go and, stick them in the barn down on my grandpa's farm. I'm sure that will keep them safe for all of eternity. Hang on a second. Yep. I needed a Kool-Aid hit after that. But anyway. Now, despite all of this ridiculousness going on, Hal is still tasked with dealing with the situation, even though he has shown remarkably poor judgment in dealing with the Manhunters more than once already. I mean, just how grateful are the Guardians? Wow. But anyway, on the upside, we do sort of get to see Hal, who obviously wants Aya back. Okay, good. We've obviously kind of been wondering where Aya was last episode, but things take time to get back on their feet and get rolling again, so it's understandable. And of course, for no discernible reason, the Guardians have apparently decided that Aya deserves to be dissected, even though it is established that the Guardians are accepting of robotic life forms. There is a Green Lantern, Steel or Stel, I'm not exactly sure how his name is pronounced. He is a robot who is a Green Lantern. So the idea that they would just automatically decide that Aya deserves to be dissected is, frankly, incredibly disturbing. And then during all of this, so Hal and Kilowog do their little crazy rescue scheme, and they swap out the new AI for the one in Aya's body. Now, let's pause and consider this for a moment. The AI that was originally in the ship, Aya, eventually evolved into a being that Hal considers a fully sentient creature and basically a teammate and friend. Now, presumably, the replacement AI, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, was also a similar nature. So, in swapping out the AIs, Hal has basically condemned a potentially and possibly already sentient being to being dissected while alive. Now, I want to restate that. Hal has possibly murdered an innocent being in order to save his friend. You know, I'm reminded of that episode of Star Trek The Next Generation here. Again, going back to the Star Trek influence on the show, where Captain Picard basically has to work as a lawyer to prove to Starfleet that Data is a sentient being and doesn't deserve to be disassembled. He must save him from being disassembled by Sandy Duncan, granted, but still. And at the end of the summation of his argument, Captain Picard makes one of his really great typical Captain Picard speeches, and he basically says, Starfleet was founded to seek out new life and new civilizations. Well, he points to Data and he goes, well, if you're looking for new life, there it sits. Now, okay, I grant you that's not exactly the speech word for word, but you get what I'm saying. So the fact that Hal was able to just do that to an AI that really, like I said, may genuinely, if it's not already there, be on its way to being a fully sentient being? What the hell, Hal? Okay. I need to talk about cheery things for a minute to get away from that rather distasteful line of thought. So let's talk about our guest stars this time around. First of all, we get to see Hal get his butt kicked by a squirrel, and that is none other than Chip. CH''P. Chip, for those of you who are not fans of the comics, is a somewhat controversial character among fans. Some people love him just because they think he's hilarious, and other people just kind of want to go out and beat their head against the wall. Given that for a time part of Chip's Green Lantern uniform included a bow tie, I generally tended to fall in with the latter group. And given that Chip ultimately died when he was, and I kid you not, hit by a truck, I think that the folks who hated Chip ultimately won out on that one. But to be fair, Chip is presented as being quite the little badass here, and him kicking Hal's butt like that was certainly one of the funniest things that we've seen on the show in quite some time. So I'm thinking Chip might win himself a few fans with this episode. This time around, we also got a guest appearance by none other than Larvox. And Larvox is another one of those Green Lanterns that is just so ridiculous that I can't really take him seriously. I don't have anything against him. It's just I cannot take him seriously. But he was used for good comedic effect this episode. Actually, it's sort of sad that the Green Lanterns, the guest Green Lanterns this episode, are generally used for nothing more than comedic effect. And then we come to shiny diamond cue ball guy whose name I can never remember. Actually, in the comics, he's also a fairly badass character who is eventually promoted to the status of Alpha Lantern, along with other folks like, I believe actually Stell and Boudica were promoted to Alpha Lantern as well. And those are some pretty seriously badass Green Lanterns. John Stewart, for example, was also offered a position as an Alpha Lantern, but declined it. Of course, the whole thing with the Alpha Lanterns ultimately, and this is a spoiler, completely goes to hell. It was probably a smart call on John Stewart's part. But anyway, first of all, I have to wonder, given that Hal just saved the Oa from being destroyed by the Red Lanterns, how is he not like the most famous Green Lantern of the entire Green Lantern Corps? Seriously, how does this guy not know who Hal is on sight? I mean, is this like his third day on the job as a Green Lantern or something? And just the way that Hal completely plays this guy, and the way he's presented as kind of a pathetic loser, I think it's a little bit of a disservice to the character from the comics, who, as I said, is generally presented as being pretty badass. But, this is one of those episodes, huh? So, of course, Hal is successful in rescuing Aya. That's all well and good. Not really sure. I'm hoping that we'll eventually get to see her rebuild her humanoid body. I'm betting that's what's going to happen. Now, the question, of course, becomes, is she going to take Razor's feelings into account and maybe come up with a different appearance than that of his dead wife? Which, kind of awkward. And speaking of Razor, we finally get our first little hint of what he's been up to. He's been on sabbatical. Now, I can't help but wonder if maybe he might have wandered back to a little planet where certain Blue Lantern has been hanging out recently. Just a thought I thought I'd throw out there. And overall, this episode, I don't think it was quite as strong as last week's episode. Again, there is a lot of good comedy. If you're a fan of the comics, you're certainly probably going to get a big kick out of all the various Lanterns who make cameo appearances. And the plot with the Manhunters does start to move forward a little bit. But not all of the portrayal of the guest Lanterns are really what I would consider terribly respectful, or maybe don't really highlight the Lanterns in the way that I would really prefer. And then there's the whole thing of whether or not Hal killed an innocent being. So yeah, not this isn't going to go down as the greatest episode, one of the greatest episodes in the history of the series, at least not in my book. But still, there are a fair number of good points in this episode. So I'm just going to ultimately give this one a rating of okay overall. So now that we've got Aya back on board, hopefully things will really get back moving along. Hopefully we see Razor again soon. But anyway, there's still enough going on that I think that the fight with the Manhunters is going to be some pretty cool stuff. So anyway, folks, with that said, as always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. And in case I didn't mention this in my last video, now that the fall TV season has kicked off in force, I've got like 5 shows that I review dropping over the weekend. And just like you guys, I'm out and about doing things on the weekends, so I'm not always going to be able to get the videos up the next day like I usually do, and that's definitely going to be true here in the case of Green Lantern. Sorry, folks. I just can't really do anything about that. There's only so many hours in the day, and real life has to come first. But I will try and maintain as regular a schedule with this sort of thing as I can. And with that said, folks, take care and have a good one.